format of these hustings, and particularly this morning's husting as well. The candidates take it in turn. So first up this morning will be Boris Johnson. We'll get a video from his team and then a speech from the man himself, interview with me, and then the questions come over to you as well. Thank you to so many of you who've already posted questions to us or sent in your questions. And then after that, Jeremy Hunt will take to the stage as well in a similar format again. Speech, interview, and then Q&A. Please don't go anywhere in between the candidates. It is a very, very swift turnaround, I assure you. So stay in your seats. But before we get down to the main details, Andrew Sharp, who's the president of the Conservative National Convention, would like to address you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Andrew Sharp, as Hannah said. I'm actually chairman of the National Convention, but that's okay. No worries at all. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this, the 8th of, I think, the 16 physical hustings that we're holding around the country. And it's great to see so many people here, but not at all surprising. The demand to attend these hustings has been pretty spectacular around the country. And, as I'm sure you're aware, has necessitated at least one change of venue. This is a very good exercise for our party. You will have already seen plenty of positive media commentary about the quality of the questions being asked. Even the Financial Times described the quality of the questions at one event as spot on, no less. And that helps dispel the typical media narrative about us, the members of our party. Although I note that the New York Times recently described us as a fanatical sect. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't look too much like a sect, but perhaps fanatical, I don't know. But no, look, the party that I and my National Convention officers know, and it's great to see James Pearson here, who just picked me up from the station, by the way, so an extra special thanks to James. The party that I and the National Convention officers know, the one that we see every week as we travel around the country, is made up of engaged and engaging men and women of every faith, colour, age and sexual preference. They're united by their belief in our country, our institutions, by an unshakable tradition of public service, and an admirable commitment to campaigning in all weathers. I've never met anybody in our party who cares where you're from. They only care where you're going. And we mustn't forget there's far more that unites us than divides us. Lord Hailsham said this: conservatism is not so much a philosophy as an attitude, a constant force performing a timeless function in the development of a free society. So we're here to undertake a solemn duty as part of that commitment to a free society, because we're not just electing a party leader, but a prime minister. And of course, the ballot papers are dropping onto doormats at the moment. Now, the country we love would expect us to ensure that this process is rigorous, and Hannah will make sure that's the case today. We need a prime minister who will deliver Brexit, but also beat our political opponents. And those of us who knock on doors week in and week out know only too well that our political opponents, in some cases, are much less committed to a free society than we are. So we made the case at the party board that the leadership campaign had to reach every part of the United Kingdom, and that all members should have access to at least one hustings. There was absolutely no disagreement about this, and at this point I'd like to thank the party chairman, the Right Honourable Brandon Lewis MP, for his support. And I'd also like to thank him more generally for his support for the voluntary party. Can I also, while I'm at it, thank the regional team here in the North East, led by Richard Bell, who've been great advocates for your region. Before I hand over, could I ask one further favour on the subject of resources? You'll have seen the literature on your seat about the Campaign Manager programme. Could you please take a moment to read it, and please support this initiative? As you know, where we have campaign managers, we do better than where we don't. It's pretty simple. But it's a hugely expensive undertaking, and at the moment we're overly reliant on others to help us. Can I ask that we actually live by our Conservative values on this and help ourselves? And can I also remind you that you will see some people rattling buckets on the way out. Please do contribute generously, it will help us. So that's it from me, a few brief words. Please enjoy your event, and please make sure that your questions are spot on as well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Right now, before we hear from the first candidate vying to be the next Prime Minister, let's hear from his campaign team. This is Boris Johnson's campaign video.
Nice to see you. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Yes, of course you can. If I get in, we'll come out deal or no deal on October the 31st.
Good man.
We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Would that make you come back and vote Conservative again?
Yes.
That's the spirit.
Yes.
But we've got to have the courage to tell the people of this country that we can do it if we really want to. And that's the only way, actually.
And you're the only person that can do that.
A lot of teachers are telling me that they feel that the funding per pupil isn't high enough. We need more police out there, but sometimes I think we need... And stop and search?
Yes.
Totally with you.
I'm scared. My daughter used to live in London as well.
Yeah.
She was at university.
Safe big city it was when I used to run it. I can tell you we got crime down by 20%, we got the murder rate down.
Like Mr. Khan off, but it's not good.
But I also think we need to be supporting the wealth creators in the business sector, because otherwise you're not going to have the dosh to invest.
Right.
Cut some taxes and you'll get more money in. Would you normally think of yourself as a Conservative voter, would you say?
No.
No? Ever? Can I ask you a terrible question? Would you consider voting for me?
Yes.
If there is one lesson from that referendum of 2016, it is that too many people feel left behind, that they're not able to take part fully in the opportunities and success of our country. That's why now is the time to unite our society and unite our country, to build the infrastructure, to invest in education, to improve our environment and to support our fantastic NHS, to lift everyone in our country, and of course also to make sure that we support our wealth creators and the businesses that make that investment possible. Now is the time for us to believe in ourselves and what we can do. And that's why I am standing to be leader of the Conservative Party.
Ladies and gentlemen, Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Nice to see you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Wonderful to see you. Thank you. It's fantastic to be here in the northeast, which is, of course, the only net exporting region in the whole of the UK. Great to be in Darlington, birthplace of the railways, and fantastic to be here in Tees Valley, where Mayor Ben Houchen is doing such an extraordinary job. And I want to see him re-elected next year, don't you? Yeah. That's right. He's doing a wonderful... There he is. He's in the front row. He's doing a wonderful, wonderful job. And the way to make sure that Ben and all our wonderful Conservatives get re-elected next year and indeed in the future is to turn the situation round. And yes, I admit that we're not doing particularly brilliantly at the moment. If you consider we got 9% in the recent European Parliament elections, I don't think I've ever known a time when our great Tory party polled 9%. But the hour is darkest before dawn. And we are going to get through this and we are going to win again. My friends, we absolutely are. And to do that, there are three things that we need to... Thank you for that applause, even at this early hour of the morning. There are three things that we need to get done, and I think you all understand what they are. We need to get Brexit over the line. We need to come out of the EU. Come out of the EU by October the 31st and restore trust in politics and in our party. And there are three things that we need to do. Obviously, we need to make sure that our European Union friends, the EU nationals, the 3.2 million people in our country, have their rights protected. We should have done that 3 years ago, in my view. Pass that into law in Parliament. Number two, take that money, the 39 billion, at the upper end of the EU's expectations, I might say, and suspend it in a state of creative ambiguity over the talks until such time as we get the answer that we need, and then take the problems of the solution of frictionless trade over the Northern Irish border, and there are lots and lots of very practical solutions to those problems, and they apply to all the areas where the UK and the EU will trade, in Calais or wherever, Rotterdam. Solve them where they properly belong, in the context of the free trade deal that we're going to do after we've come out on October the 31st. Isn't that the logical thing to do? Do that and protract the existing arrangements, and we will have a very, very smooth and orderly exit from the EU. But in case our friends and partners say they don't want that, in case they say non, rien ne va plus, you can't change anything in this withdrawal agreement, we're not going to compromise, well, okay, then we've got to get ready for a no-deal exit. And do you think this great country can do it? Yes. I think we can. We're a great country. Look, here in the northeast, there's an enormously resilient economy. We can get ready for a no-deal Brexit. We can get ready our just-in-time supply chains. We can prepare. And the agricultural sector, people say that after we come out there will be no drinking water and no planes won't fly, and I read the other day that the Ministry of Agriculture said that there will be no milk solids and glucose and whey to make the Mars bars on which our children depend. And I have to say, I think it is absolute nonsense. I make a confident prediction that whatever happens on November the 1st, after we've come out, on October the 31st, the planes will fly, there will be clean drinking water, and there will be whey for our Mars bars, because where there's a will, there's a way, ladies and gentlemen. And there will be Parmos, by the way, here, which I have eaten many times. I'm glad to say, in the company of my friend Simon and Clark and others. And then we have a fantastic opportunity to relaunch our party, to galvanise the country with our vision. It's very, very simple, of modern progressive conservatism. And we will do incredible things to unite our country in the way that I hope, you can see, we united London. If you remember, 11 years ago when I became mayor, we had 4 of the 6 poorest boroughs anywhere in the UK in London. And when I stepped down after 2 terms, we had none of the poorest 20. And that was because we did fantastic things with infrastructure, with technology, and we cut crime massively. We need to do the same thing across the UK. Get more police out on the street, cut crime, back them up with stop and search, do far more with transport infrastructure. I want to be the Prime Minister who does for Northern Powerhouse Rail what I did for Crossrail in London, for the West Midlands what I did with the tube upgrades. We should be putting in full fibre broadband across the whole country. It's a disgrace that Spain has 90% coverage of full fibre, 85% coverage. We have only 7% here in this country. No more manana approach to full fibre. We can do it, and we must do it. And I would also say that we have a fantastic opportunity to level up our education funding, as I've pledged, across the country, so that we increase funding for schools around Britain, but also to take advantage of exit from the EU. It's time we started backing the incredible potential of areas like Teesside, and how about having a free port in Teesside, which you could do, as Ben has rightly proposed. As Ben has proposed, take advantage of leaving the EU to turbocharge business and manufacturing here in this area. Fantastic opportunity to take back control of our tax arrangements and tariffs and do a free port. And of course, there is one guy who doesn't get any of that, who doesn't understand the wealth-creating side of the economy at all, who would destroy. It's not just that he backs Hamas and Hezbollah and all the rest of it. He would put up taxes on inheritance, on pensions, on income, on financial transactions, on corporation tax would go up to the highest level in Europe. You know who he is. He's Jeremy Corbyn and his Labour Party, a far, far left of any incarnation of the Labour Party I've known in my lifetime, except, of course, the London Labour left. And I would remind you that the last time I was called upon to defeat an emanation of the London Labour left, considerably wilier and more devious than Jeremy Corbyn, a guy who actually sacked John McDonnell for lying and being too left-wing, if I recall correctly, in the form of Ken Livingstone. We came from behind. We came from behind, we overhauled it, and we defeated the London Labour left when our party, the Great Conservative Party, was 17 points behind in London. We did it then, and we're going to do it again. We're going to prick the twin puffballs of the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats, who are sprouting saprophytically on the sense of decay in politics, and we're going to knock Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party for 6. My friends, we must win, we can win, and with your help, we will win. Thank you very much, and I hope I can count on your support. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Boris Johnson, as Foreign Secretary,
yes,
intelligence information was held back from you due to concerns over your discipline. How does that make you feel? Well,
it's not true, but I obviously can't comment any further on intelligence matters.
It seems reports suggest that the order itself came from Theresa May over fears that you couldn't be trusted.
I'm sure that the Prime Minister will not comment on intelligence matters either, so I'm extremely dubious about the provenance of this story.
But were you aware at the time that perhaps some sensitive information was being held back from you?
Look, It's not true, and I don't comment on intelligence matters.
So you deny it altogether?
I do.
Okay. Have you made any gaffes in your time in politics that
Yes.
would concern people?
Yes, I have, and I'm proud of many of them because the important point about gaffes is that very often, and some of them obviously I regret and I've apologised for, but very often a gaffe turns out to be the round unvarnished. When people say that you're making a gaffe, what you're really doing is saying something that is true and necessary, and.
But it's also potentially a security risk.
Well, again, sorry, if you're going back to that question, I thought I don't comment on intelligence matters, and the story that you've adverted to is not true.
Okay. Let's move on. No deal and Brexit. The Chancellor, Philip Hammond, has said that he's confident the House of Commons will find a way to avert no deal if you choose that route.
I think, Philip and I sat in cabinet for a long time together, and he was part of the cabinet that was very, very determined to make sure that we got ready for no deal. That it was part of I think it was part of the Conservative manifesto in 2017, wasn't it? And we all stood on that platform to get ready for no deal, and I'm sure that Philip has done his part to prepare. In fact, we were very close to being fully ready in late March. We could have gone out with a no-deal Brexit then. We will be totally ready on October the 31st, and I look forward to his support Philip's support in that endeavour. But where I agree with Philip is that is not necessarily where we want to end up. We have a very good opportunity, I think, to come out with a much better deal, and that is to take the problems of the backstop, remit them for solution in the place where they logically belong in the context of negotiating the free trade deal.
Are you concerned about this veiled threat or not so veiled threat from members of the Conservative Party in Parliament at the moment, the likes of Philip Hammond, Sam Gyimah, David Gauke as well, the Justice Secretary, saying that they would potentially come up with some plan to overrule no deal?
Look, I think this is all a bit of a red herring. We are facing an existential crisis as a party and indeed as a political class, if I may say so, as representatives of the people. We asked the people whether they wanted to leave the European Union. It was right to ask the people after 45 years whether they wanted to stay in an entity that had so radically changed its ambitions, that had federalised, that had become a very, very different proposition, a federal political unit. That question was right to pose to the British people because it goes to their identity, their sense of their future, their destiny, their potential, everything they want to do. The British people returned a very clear answer. And considering the forces that were ranged against them on the other side of the argument, it was really extraordinary. They voted, 17.4 million people voted to leave. It was a clear majority for leave. The MPs acknowledged that, and they voted, MPs themselves voted overwhelmingly to trigger Article 50 and to come out of the EU. And now we're in a state where MPs seem still to be refusing to enact the mandate of the people. And that is why my party, our great party, is languishing in the polls. It's why Labour is on, 18%? You know, with heroic incompetence, Corbyn has managed to do even worse than us. It's quite extraordinary. And the very simple reason for that, the main parties are not getting on and delivering the will of the people. If we get on and do Brexit, then we will spike the guns of the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats, both of whom are prospering at our expense because of our failure to get this done. And I think all politicians can see this, and I hope that Philip and Sam and all the friends that you mentioned can see that too.
The Conservative Party majority, though, within Parliament is very, very slim and seemingly now very, very fragile. You've said in the past that you think the mood is turning in Parliament. It doesn't seem to be the case. Well,
actually, Hannah, I'm not sure that I agree with that. I think when I talk to my friends in the Commons, and I see Simon and Anne-Marie nodding wisely in the front row, and wouldn't it be great to have Peter Gibson, by the way, elected in Darlington? Wouldn't it be fantastic? I think people can see that we need to come together, and one of the advantages, at the risk of being immodest, but now's the moment. One of the advantages that I think that my candidacy presents is that I already have more than half the parliamentary party, and it's growing the whole time, the MPs who are signing up to our cause. More and more are coming out for us, and that's great because we've got dozens of Leavers and dozens of Remainers on our side, and so we're actually physically embodying the what I hope will be the unity of the party. Now, it will be, there will be a lot of work to do. There will be a lot of engagement, a lot of conversations, but it can be done, and it's in the national interest that we do this, because what's the alternative? More loss of trust, hemorrhage of support, and ultimately, we all know where that will lead. It will lead, I'm afraid, to the Brexit Party colonising huge chunks of our political territory, the Liberal Democrats taking it as well, and that means, I'm afraid, Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. And we don't want that.
It does seem, though, that it's not just the party that's potentially wavering on you as well, but also the country at large. A YouGov poll just last month on who would make a better Prime Minister had 41% for Jeremy Hunt and 29% for you. Does that concern you?
Well, look at my record in London and in defeating the Labour left and in winning very difficult elections. Don't forget that nobody said that I could win in London in 2008, let alone in 2012, and nobody thought that we could win the referendum, and we did. So I think, I'm absolutely certain that I represent the best chance for our party to come together to get Brexit done and to defeat Jeremy Corbyn, and that's our prime function.
You mentioned before about no-deal preparations, how they were almost in place by the end of March, and they will be in place now by the end of October. Have no-deal preparations in between that period, though, been inadequate?
Well, I think what certainly happened was that there was a sliding off after March the 29th, and it is absolutely true to say that we slightly sagged on our oars. And we now need to brace again and get things really ready. And I think one of the problems has been that business has understandably been a bit confused about what they're supposed to do, because they have half the cabinet telling them that no deal's totally unconscionable and mustn't happen at any price, even though they stood on a manifesto to get ready for it. And then and then they're getting leaflets saying prepare for it. So I think business has been confused. My message will be very clear. We have to get ready, we have to prepare, and we have to believe in ourselves. And if I may say so, the reason I set October the 31st as a hard deadline, and the reason we've got to go for it, is because I think we've had enough of defeatism and negativity from this government. I think the British people are fed up with being told that they can't do X, Y, or Z, when we know perfectly well that we can. And I think that our opponents I think that across the table in Brussels, they need to look deep into our eyes and think, my goodness, these guys really are going to do it, and they're ready, and if necessary, they will come out on WTO terms, and yes, they probably will survive and prosper. So I know what we're going to give them the deal that they want, and that is the way forward. And if we want to minimise the risk of a disruptive and disorderly Brexit, the most important thing to do is to prepare for a no-deal Brexit really thoroughly now, and we can do it.
Final question to you. Can you give an example in your political life when you've set your own self-interest aside for the benefit of the country?
Well, it's a good question, but I would, I don't. Obviously, it's embarrassing, but true. But that it is obviously possible. How should I put this? To make more money by not being a full-time politician. I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but you have to make sacrifices sometimes, and that is the right thing to do. And there's no doubt at all that being a full-time politician means that I won't be able, for instance, to rapidly complete a book on Shakespeare that I have in preparation, and that means that unjustly neglected author will no longer, get the treatment he deserves as fast as it might otherwise happen. And I'm sorry, and that will I honestly say that will grieve me, because I love Shakespeare. I love writing about him.
And after dinner speeches that you've taken significant payments for since stepping down as Foreign Secretary.
That will, so I will be depriving myself of the joy of completing that work on Shakespeare as fast as I would like, and I would be depriving the reading public of elucidation on Shakespeare, which I'm sure they've been crying out for.
Let's see if they're crying out to ask you some questions then as well. We're going to go to the floor now. There will be microphones being passed around, so if I do call your name, if you wouldn't mind just waiting until the microphone comes to you. We're coming to Peter Wood, if Peter is here. If you just make yourself known, so we... There you are. Lovely.
Peter Wood from Sunderland. What is your commitment to the Northern Powerhouse, and in particular improved transport links throughout the north of England?
Well, I think that the Northern Powerhouse needs to be given much more content, and we need to be investing not just in full fibre broadband that I have described, but we need to be really putting in those high-speed rail connections. And we as Conservatives were really driven by we are the party that puts in fantastic transport infrastructure, by the way. You look around at all the big schemes that have been done over the UK, whether it was the Channel Tunnel or the M25, the Jubilee Line extension. It's always Conservatives who drive these things forwards. And that's because we know that they're vital for improving the prospects for economic growth, but they're also vital for social justice. Let me explain. Unless you put in great transport infrastructure, you're going to make it much more difficult for people on modest incomes to live near their place of work and to commute. And if you do put in great mass transit systems, high speed, the Crossrail of the North, which I would like to see, then you revolutionize the productive capacity of those regions. And look at what you could do in the West Midlands as well, by the way. It's incredible. And you liberate people on low incomes to get great jobs. I want an economy which is high wage and low tax and high skill. That's the way forward for our country.
Terry Walker has a question, just at the back there to my right.
Thank you. Good morning, Boris.
Good morning, sir.
Terry Walker. When Brexit happens, will our fishing industry be returned to its former status? And will we reimpose the 12-mile limit?
Well, Terry, what I can certainly say is that we will be taking back control of our fisheries. I can't comment on exactly on what we'll do with the 12-mile limit, but we will want to be championing UK fishing again and making sure that we reverse the sellout of Ted Heath in the 1970s, who basically traded away UK fishing rights in the last moments of the UK accession talks. We cannot have that again. And by the way, fisheries is a fantastic argument to make to the people in Scotland about how the Brexit will actually cement the union. Because I ask you, do you really believe that the SNP will, once we've made a great success of Brexit and we've come out in the way that I've described, and we're doing all the things, free ports and all the rest of it in the UK, do you think they're really going to go to the people of Scotland and say, we've got a brilliant idea, we're going to go back, Scotland's going to join the EU, and it's going to join the Euro, and we're going to hand back control of Scottish fisheries to Brussels? I don't think that's a winning ticket for them. So taking back control of our fisheries is absolutely vital, but we've also got to make sure that we have people who, we have the productive capacity in the UK to take advantage of our fishing resources, because a lot of them clearly are being fished by other countries at the moment, and that has meant a decline in UK fishing. So there's a massive opportunity, but it will need some support and a proper strategy for fishing as well.
Zach Moody has a question. Zach. in the centre there, if we can get a microphone to Zach.
Hello, I'm Zach Moody from Gateshead. As a young Conservative, I would like to know how you will appeal to more younger voters. My friends and fellow students at school are not fans of the party, and I would like to know what you're going to do to combat that.
Thank you. My experience actually is that many young people are attracted to conservatism once you explain what it's all about. And it's all about giving people opportunity. And I've talked just now about giving every kid in the country the same basic tool to make the most of their lives with better educational funding, both in primary and in secondary school. And I want to level up education funding around the country, not a seesaw, but level up education funding. I also want to see us do something to tackle student debt and the high interest rates that students pay on their debt. It's a massive Ponzi scheme, all this debt that is being racked up by students at the moment. I think there's very little chance it will all get paid back. We need to think about the way that is working. And I think that young people basically want to be given the chance to take part in our great, free market economy. And when they can't get a share of the value of their home, when they can't get on the property ladder, when there's no prospect of home ownership, of course they feel excluded. And this is a problem particularly acute, obviously, in the southeast, but across the country, we need to be helping young people into home ownership. And that means building more good quality homes, not on the green belt and not on greenfield sites. There is plenty of room on brownfield sites to build fantastic homes, and we should be helping young people to have a share of their homes. Or into home ownership. Last point, the environment. In my experience, young people care passionately about the future of their planet. They want to know that we're the party that understands that and also champions the environment. And we are. We've got a fantastic record of environmental improvements. And this is the party that champions clean battery technology, all the improvements in air quality that we've seen over the last few years. We're the party, I think I'm right to say that the Labour has more or less given up on the green agenda because we're doing so many things, whether it's reducing the use of plastic bags or whatever. We're doing so many things on the environment that they feel that the Tory party is now the party of a cleaner and better environment. And that is a winner for us. It's a winner. It's also, by the way, the right thing to do, because the jobs that we're creating in clean technology will continue to expand for generations to come, and they offer, and here in this part of the country, they make all sorts of wind turbines and so on, which revolutionary stuff that will not only generate energy cleanly and efficiently, but also provide jobs, and that's a message that we can really sell to young people, I think.
Dan Reid.
Good morning. Do you support the idea of a British constitutional document similar to that which exists in the USA to protect freedom of expression?
Well, I think that we have. Look, I think we have a general right in this country to say whatever we want, provided we don't infringe various statutes against hate speech and xenophobia and all the rest of it, and that's the way it should be. And the presumption in our country should be in favour of liberty.
Once we're outside of the EU, though, after Brexit, and outside of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU, would British rights still be protected with regards to Dan's question on freedom of expression?
Oh, the right to free speech has been protected in this country since the 18th century. I'm sorry, we don't owe our right to free speech to the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU. It was Mansfield's judgment in the case of Wilkes or whatever, and the North Britain that protected free speech and freedom of. We don't need any. I'm sorry, this sort of makes me mildly irritated. We don't need any protection from the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU, blessed document though that is, to guarantee free speech in this country. And may I say, I deplore xenophobia and racism and hate speech of all kinds, and there should be no place for that in our party. But I do think we should be able to sometimes to speak our minds frankly without fear that we're instantly going to get our heads bitten off. If I can put it that way.
Anne Murphy has a question. Is Anne here? I know yes, just over there.
Thank you. Anne Murphy from City of Durham. Is austerity a dead duck?
Well, I was on a plane to Dublin not long ago, where we were exporting live ducklings to Ireland. I'm proud to say. Sorry, I don't know why I say that. Just to show the diversity of UK exports. So the hold was full of live ducklings. I'm afraid they were all going to the Chinese restaurants of Dublin. Austerity itself is, I think, not a helpful term. I never liked it. It was always right to bear down on the national debt. It was always right to reduce the deficit, and I pledge as Prime Minister to continue to reduce the national debt. That is very, very important. But I think now is the time, and I believe there is widespread support for this, for us to do some targeted spending on things that really need investment. And I've mentioned education, and I think that's the right thing to do. I've mentioned policing, and I think that is also right. There is fiscal headroom to do this spending, and we should do it. But we should also, don't forget, the Chancellor in February, I think, took in 14.5 billion more in revenues than he spent. So there's about 26 billion there, and we should be putting money into things that really matter, including, as I say, broadband and infrastructure as well. But you can also find some ways of cutting taxation. And every time corporation tax has been cut in this country, it has produced more revenue. And we as Conservatives should be looking to stimulate business and enterprise. And I've talked about what we could do with a Freeport here in Teesside. We should be stimulating business and enterprise by looking to cut taxes that are unfair or too high. Now, the business rates, I think, are very high at the moment. And I think you'd actually stimulate more growth if you had some judicious tax cuts as well. And we'll be looking at that side of it as well, but bearing down on debt the whole time.
So just to confirm then, deal or no deal, is the age of austerity over?
I never liked it. I remember Dave Cameron saying to me he wanted to have an austerity Olympics, and I said, no way, mate, no way. That was not the stuff to give the troops. What we wanted was a great Olympics. And we will do things. Yeah, you've got, obviously, you've got to be fiscally prudent. Labour always goes wrong because they tax and spend too much. You've got to be very, very careful with the public finances. We will continue to bear down on government debt. But sometimes there are fantastic investments that you can make where you can borrow at low rates, particularly for infrastructure, and you can continue to reduce the size of government borrowing, and that's what we should be doing.
Lynn Marsay has a question.
Billions of pounds are spent every year on overseas aid, and yet families in Broadwater Farm, one example, live in dire conditions and face the summer holidays with no free summer play schemes and no free school meals. Many such families will have international background. Irony or a scandal?
Thank you. Do you mean Broadwater Farm in Tottenham? Right. Oh, forgive me. Okay. Look, I mean, obviously, I was the mayor of Broadwater Farm and the whole of London, and you say many such families have international backgrounds, and yes, that is absolutely true. And, London is the most diverse city in the world. 300 languages spoken there, but it's also the most economically productive region of the whole of Europe. It really is. And it's our ability to attract people of talent from around the world that has helped to make London so extraordinary. And actually, you're starting to see in other great cities around the UK, you're starting to see the same sort of mix. A youthful population, university educated, diverse, obsessed with tech, all sorts of stuff that I don't understand, and doing all sorts of startups and enterprises that are very, very exciting and driving the economy. Now, I think that the story of communities that have come to London and made their lives in London is amazing. And it, began, you could trace it back to the Huguenots, the Jewish refugees from Tsarist Russia, Bangladeshis, you name it. Waves have come to London, and slowly they have changed, they have adapted, and they've made their lives, and they've helped to make our national culture, and they've bought into it. And that's what I want for our country. I want everybody who comes here and makes their lives here to be and to feel British. That's the most important thing. And to learn English. And too often there are parts of our country, and parts of London still, and other cities as well, where English is not spoken by some people as their first language, and that needs to be changed, and people need to be allowed to take part in the economy and in society in the way that that shared experience would allow. Sorry. I'm sorry, forgive me. No, well, maybe I have misunderstood the question.
Part of your question was about should we spend more then on immigrant families already here in the UK rather than sending the money abroad?
Oh, I see. You're talking about overseas spending. Okay, I'm sorry. Lynn, forgive me. I understand what you're saying. You're asking about the ODA budget and the 0.7% that's spent on development aid, and why are we spending money overseas when we have... I'm sorry, I get your question. Look, just to complete the point about immigrant communities in London, they're showing extraordinary economic success and dynamism. So that's a fantastic thing. But in terms of spending on overseas aid, I do see people's anxieties about it. I do understand that a lot of money is shoved out of the door and spent by aid agencies in a way that we don't necessarily control. And I think successive development secretaries would agree with me about that. But it is a fantastic thing that this country does. I would like, and it gains us huge admiration and respect around the world. And believe me, it really does. But I would like to see that money spent in a way that is more consistent with UK commercial objectives and UK diplomatic and political objectives. Because it seems to me crazy to be spending £14 billion a year, or whatever the ODA budget is, when we could be using that money more tactically to support British business without in any way frustrating our development objectives. And I noticed in Japan, the Japanese were brilliant at backing their companies with export support and with overseas development finance. Sorry, I noticed in Burma, for instance, the Japanese were very good at supporting their companies in a way that we weren't. And we need to be much, much cleverer, I think, in the way that we use ODA finance. That's what I'd like to see.
I want to get on to some more questions. Michael Stevenson, please. We can maybe pass the microphone along.
Morning, Mike Stevenson. The average profit per hectare for UK farmland is £150, which is the same as our current environmental payments from Brussels. Will it be sustainable to continue to pay us for greening and the environment post-Brexit?
The short answer is yes, Michael. We will continue to support UK agriculture. We will make sure that we continue with vital support for farmers. And when we do free trade deals, we will make sure, as we will make sure that we don't allow stuff to come in that doesn't conform to UK standards on hygiene or animal welfare. I think that that's very important. But we certainly won't be going for an immediate, New Zealand-style revolution in agriculture. We will be wanting to make sure that our farmers are properly protected.
Fiona Smith. Is Fiona here? Oh, yes.
From Redcar. My question relates to the job prospects and career prospects of degree apprentices and apprentices in general, as this is a region where apprenticeships are very popular. How do you intend to attract inward investment to the UK post-Brexit to protect the jobs of the 95 engineering and science degree apprentices which I arranged last year?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for what you've done to champion those apprenticeships and to arrange them. This country is a magnet for inward investment already. We got last year £1.3 trillion in overseas investment, far more than any other European country. And we did it because we have the right time zone, we have the right language. And what I will do to help attract more is several things. So of course, I talked about the tax environment that we want to have, the most tax competitive environment for business in Europe. I've talked about free ports, but I think you can also do more to support apprenticeships with FE colleges and with technical training. I think our universities are the best in the world. We should be very proud of them. But a lot of kids actually would do equally brilliantly with technical and practical training in FE and in further education. And we should be, I think it's a Cinderella sector. It's had its funding cut and it needs proper support. And that, I think, would help boost apprenticeships as well.
Susan Elliott. Susan, just at the front here, to my right.
Good morning, Boris. My name's Susan Elliott from Bishop Auckland. It's known that a number of Conservative MPs didn't vote to accept Theresa May's deal due to the fact their constituents voted to remain. How are you going to convince them to vote for your deal when they don't want to leave?
Well, I think that they're just going to have to get used to the fact that we're all going to have to get used to the fact that unless we get on and do this, we will continue to hemorrhage support. So I just really revert to the answer I gave earlier, which is that we face extinction unless we get Brexit over the line. And if we get Brexit over the line, we have a massive opportunity. And so we need both to be less defeatist and more positive. And that's the way forward.
So colleagues of yours in Remain-leaning constituencies would vote against their constituents to support you?
Well, I think that we live in a united kingdom. It was the biggest ever expression of popular will. I think all those MPs voted to trigger Article 50. They all did. Let's get on and do it. They owe their constituents, they owe the country, they owe the people to get it done.
Martin Bell has a question, I believe,
Martin Bell?
In the middle. Not that. I don't think it's that Martin Bell.
Fantastic. Glad he's back. Where's Martin Bell?
He's in the middle, but if we can just pass the microphone down, thank you.
Martin Bell. Let's time hop. 12 months from now, what is your prediction for the future state of our country?
Thank you. Martin, I think the future state of I think if I'm right, and if I'm elected, and I hope I will be, then I think that our country will have pitchforked off the incubus of Brexit. We will have got it done. We will be set fair on a programme of boosting education around the country, of making rapid strides in improving our transport infrastructure, rolling out full fibre broadband, another year down the track of rolling out full fibre broadband, and we will be bringing our country together. And I think I hope very much that we will be once again powerfully and convincingly articulating a conservative mission to our country and conservative values. And if we can recover our voice and our confidence, we can make the moral case for conservatism and the Conservative Party. If you support wealth creation, if you support business, that's the way to pay for fantastic infrastructure, great public services, an amazing NHS, and everything else that makes our country wonderful. It's a balance. And I think that in 12 months' time, miraculously, the gloom will have lifted, optimism will have returned, and we'll have got a great Brexit deal, and we'll be negotiating free trade deals, above all with our European Union friends and partners, but with the rest of the world as well. And I think that we'll all be in much better fettle. That's my confident prediction.
Will you be Prime Minister?
Well, that's my earnest
in
hope.
12 months' time.
Sorry, I submit that wasn't that obvious from the foregoing. I mean, that's really. Yes, I should perhaps have said, for the absence of doubt, I believe that all those things would be best achieved with me as leader. Clearly, it's
Prime Minister in 12 months' time.
Yes, that's absolutely my intention,
Okay.
and I think there is every reason to be confident in our country and to believe in ourselves. And what I think has been lacking from politics for 3 years has been a sense of what this country can do. And it's been an incredible privilege to do this election campaign over the last few weeks and months, because you see all the extraordinary things that are happening in Britain. You're shunted, or you meet people who have started doing new businesses, and you understand the range of energy and activity in the UK. And whether it's building ultra-low carbon ships in the Isle of Wight, I had no idea, exporting them to Mexico, or a fantastic sausage factory I went to yesterday in somewhere in Yorkshire, where the sausages blew up as I was trying to make them. But they're exporting sausages now to Australia from Yorkshire, and that is the kind of energy and enterprise this country has. We lead the world in all the high-tech fields of the 21st century, whether it's bioscience, pharmaceuticals, high-tech, academia, culture, media, the arts, you name it. We're miles ahead. But we at the moment, I'm afraid, we are painfully lacking in self-belief. And there's one group.
We are over time.
Anyway, Hannah's going to try and shunt me off the stage now, quite rightly. But all I want to say is that around the world, people admire and love and respect this country, and if only we could see ourselves as others see us, I think we'd learn a fantastic lesson.
Boris Johnson, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, as I said, don't go anywhere. We're going to go straight into the next candidate as well. So before we hear from Jeremy Hunt, let's hear from his campaign team.
The most striking quality about Jeremy Hunt was his unwavering commitment to get results. I think perhaps part of that is to do with his background in business. No matter what the obstacles were, he was prepared to push through them. He wanted to get results.
I've seen him deliver on the things that matter most to the British people. He has credibility from all sides. I trust him on Brexit.
I've known Jeremy for 40 years, and about 25 of those years we've worked together, setting up various businesses. Those early days were absolutely about his determination and grit. He would never give up.
When I first met Jeremy, I realised he was a man who actually was committed to making a difference.
In 2008, I lost my baby son Joshua as a consequence of serious failures in his care during my campaign to kind of uncover the truth about what happened. I was struggling to be heard. Jeremy really listened and treated me as a grieving dad rather than a troublemaker. I knew that this was somebody who was going to change things.
My mum died quite tragically from poor care in Mid-Souths. Jeremy was incredibly kind. He saw the bereaved daughter behind the campaigner, and he saw it was people that mattered.
I have known Jeremy Hunt since the early 2000s. He and his business partner started funding the education of children living with HIV in our community-based programme. Jeremy's generosity was sensed by us all.
That desire to make a difference really drives him. It's never been about him. It's always been about what he can do to help others.
The work he's done will save the lives of countless babies, and other families will not have to go through the kind of pain that we did.
People often underestimate Jeremy because he comes across as being such a polite and generous and nice person, and he is. But I remember hearing him warning the EU not to mistake British politeness for British weakness, and I thought that just about sums him up.
I was pessimistic about the London Olympics. I thought, we could mess this up. I remember talking to Jeremy in the build-up. He said, no, we're a great country. We can do this if we have the right mindset. The delivery was outstanding, but also had this element of fun. I know that Jeremy was very involved in getting that balance right.
He believes in Britain as a force for good in the world. He's shown strong values at the FCO and consistently good judgment.
Negotiate, toughing it out when things get really difficult, keeping going, having a vision. Those are the skills that we need in a Prime Minister.
He's a unifier. He's somebody who can reach out to different groups of people.
My dad always taught me that politics should be about making a difference in ordinary people's lives. And Jeremy made a huge difference to our lives. He gave us hope, and that for me was the main thing, that he gave us hope in some very, very dark days.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeremy Hunt.
Hi, Hannah. Hello. Hi. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and it's fantastic to be in Darlington. Yesterday in York, at the Railway Museum, I saw Stephenson's rocket, and of course now we are at the home of the world's first public railway, which everyone knows, but I found out some other things about Darlington that I didn't know before, which is the engineering brilliance here means that you are an exporter of bridges all over the world. There's a Darlington Bridge spanning the River Nile, a Darlington Bridge spanning the Amazon, and of course, it's not just engineering brilliance, but it is political brilliance in having a Conservative Mayor of Teesside, Ben Houchen. Let's give Ben a big round of applause. And something else which is interesting, but perhaps not quite so world-renowned, is that Darlington is the home of Student Finance England. And I'm just wondering if we can use that engineering brilliance to reduce the extortionate 6% interest rate on student tuition fees, which is a big problem in attracting young voters. And that's one of the things I'll do. Now, I'm here to tell you what I want to change as our Prime Minister. And to govern is to choose. And I have 4 priorities, which I want to tell you briefly, and then we can talk about more in the questions. But we can't do any of that until we deliver Brexit. And when it comes to Brexit, on no deal, there is not an enormous difference between me and Boris. We both want a deal. We're both prepared to leave without a deal if we can't get one. But the main difference is in the type of person that we send to Brussels and who is most likely to be able to negotiate a deal that can get through Parliament as the quickest and safest way of leaving the European Union. And if you choose me, I'll be the first Prime Minister who has a background as an entrepreneur. Now, how many people here have set up their own business? Can you just put your... Just look around. I ask this question everywhere I go. Hannah's seen it before. And this is our Conservative Party. We are the doers, the wealth creators, the risk takers. And what do entrepreneurs do? I've given the answer away there. What do entrepreneurs do every day of their working lives? They negotiate. They know not to blink. They know to walk away. They know how to develop trust so that you can get a deal, because people only do a deal with someone they trust. And that is what I want to do
for our country. And when we've done that, there is so much opportunity. As someone who's set up their own business, I want to fire up our economy to be the most high-tech, greenest, pro-enterprise economy anywhere in Europe. We have in this country the top universities in Europe, some of the very best ones in the world. Add that to all our technology entrepreneurs, the medicines we're being developed here. We have the chance to be the world's next Silicon Valley. And why does that matter? Because in this part of the world, you gave our country the first industrial revolution. That transformed our country. We could be the country that's home to the fourth industrial revolution. Driverless cars, drones, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, all these things that will set us up for the future. And when it comes to those trade negotiations with Europe, mean that they need us every bit as much as we need them. Now, I'm also the son of a naval officer who wants Britain to walk tall in the world. And you know, when I go to other countries, the thing that really strikes you and surprises you is that they have a whole lot more respect for us than we sometimes have for ourselves. And thanks to the service of my dad's generation, we won the Cold War, because we in this country never took peace for granted. And we're one of the very few countries that has consistently stood up for democratic values and the security needed to underpin those values. And that's why I've said I will spend a bigger proportion of our GDP on defence, because I want us to be safe, but also I want to send a message at the point of Brexit that Britain is strong, Britain is confident, and Britain's voice will be heard in the world. And then the third one, we're racing through these priorities, and I'm looking at the clock as I know Hannah is. I think that Conservatives must have a social mission as well as an economic mission. You saw all those hands go up just now. People know that we understand wealth creation, but they need to understand our values as well. Now, I'd be the first Prime Minister who's been responsible for our NHS, and I'm incredibly proud of having done that for longer than anyone else. But I want our social mission to be education. Despite the brilliant reforms that Michael Gove was responsible for, we still have nearly a quarter of our primary school leavers who aren't able to read or write properly. And I want us to be the Conservative government that abolishes the scourge of illiteracy in our society. Because as Conservatives, we believe in opportunity for absolutely everyone. And I want us to be able to promise that every young person will leave education with a rigorous qualification so that they can get a decently paid job. Because we're the party that wants to put a ladder in front of each and every person as they start their life. Whether they choose to climb that ladder is up to them, but we're the party that's going to put it there. And then finally, a political promise to you. If I become Prime Minister, I will not take us into a general election until we've got more young people supporting our party. We can't be the party of aspiration unless the most aspirational people in the country are voting for us. Why does that matter? Because that was the reason that Corbyn did so well at the last election. Ignore that, and you ignore a Labour Party led by the most anti-British, anti-Western, ruthless, dangerous, hard-left cabal that we have ever seen in our history. Now, faced with a hard-left populist, ladies and gentlemen, we could choose our own populist, or we could do better. We could choose our own Jeremy. And this is a Jeremy who will win the argument for enterprise, aspiration, social justice. Get this wrong. and there will be no Conservative government, no Brexit, maybe even no Conservative Party. Get it right, and we will deliver Brexit, unite our party, unleash the enormous potential of our amazing country, and send Corbyn packing. Let me show you how. Thank you very much.
Jeremy Hunt, Foreign Secretary. We've heard today reports that when he was Foreign Secretary, sensitive information was withheld from Boris Johnson. Are you confident that you are seeing everything?
Well, it's terrible that your very first question is one you can't give a straight answer to. But we do have a rule that we never comment on intelligence matters. And that would include...
You're seeing everything.
Hannah, that would include comments about my predecessor and comments about myself. And I just say this, we have the finest intelligence services in the world in this country, but that does depend on some discretion by the Foreign Secretary, so I'm not going to breach that now.
I'm not asking you to reveal sensitive information, but how concerned would you be if you learned that intelligence information was being withheld from you?
I'm sorry, I have given you a straight answer. I'm not commenting on intelligence matters.
Would it impact your ability to do the job?
Theoretically and practically, it would impact on every Foreign Secretary if we started answering questions about intelligence, and it would be the wrong thing to do.
Okay. I want to talk to you about Islamophobia within the party as well. Do you support Tory party members being allowed to choose the next Prime Minister while they are still under investigation for alleged Islamophobia?
Well, 2 points on that. First of all, we're a party that has led the charge against Jeremy Corbyn for not dealing with anti-Semitism, and I think the way he has behaved in the Labour Party has made me ashamed to be British, because frankly, as someone who's visited Auschwitz and thought rather complacently that we would never have to worry about anti-Semitism in our own country, to see what Corbyn has been doing in the Labour Party is absolutely sickening, number one. I'm coming to that. But if we are going to do that, we have to root out all prejudice in our own party, including Islamophobia. So that's why I support an independent inquiry. The reality is that before you can deprive someone of their vote, there has to be due process. That is fair. But normally, what happens when that is happening is that people are suspended. That's the normal practice. I support that normal practice.
So the ballot papers have already been sent out. So people who are currently under investigation will potentially be able to select the next Prime Minister of this country. Do you support that?
Well, if there is anyone who has those prejudices, who has managed to slip through the net and is voting in this election, don't vote for me. I don't want your vote.
Okay. Anne Widdecombe, former Conservative colleague of yours, now obviously with the Brexit Party, she has likened Brexit to the emancipation of slaves. How damaging are comments like that to successful negotiations that you would wish to take up with our EU partners?
Well, I think they would be damaging to the atmosphere of trust that you need in negotiations if they came from the British government. But Anne Widdecombe is not in the British government. She's not even in the Conservative Party. And I think there's been some terrible rhetoric on the EU side about the United Kingdom, which has been the biggest friend to the European Union since the whole time that we've been in it, which has defended Europe with our armed forces, which has troops in Estonia, which helps defend countries like Poland and Romania. So I think we need to dial down the rhetoric on all sides and come to a sensible way forward that allows us to leave the European Union cleanly, but also be the best of friends afterwards.
There are seemingly a growing number of Conservative MPs who are plotting or trying to come up with some kind of plan to avoid no deal at all costs. With a fragile majority in Parliament, how do you intend to win them over?
By showing them that we have an approach that is most likely to secure a deal. And I think the reason that things sadly went wrong for Theresa May is that the EU stopped wanting to negotiate with us and stopped wanting to make concessions because they didn't believe that she would be able to deliver the British Parliament. So in my negotiating team, I will have the DUP, the ERG, Scottish and Welsh Conservatives, a team of people that will demonstrate to the European Commission that whatever we are offering, we can also deliver through Parliament. So I think that's the most important thing. But to my colleagues who want to take no deal off the table, I just say to them, any negotiator has their hand profoundly weakened if the other side think that you can't walk away. So the best way to get a deal is to leave no deal on the table. And the best way to get an orderly Brexit and to avoid a disorderly no-deal Brexit is to give our Prime Minister the strongest possible negotiating hand. So please don't take no deal off the table. Let us negotiate the best possible deal.
Considering no deal and no deal preparations that have been made so far, as a nation, are we woefully underprepared as things stand for no deal, given that Brexit could just be around just 120 odd days away?
No. I think we got a bit behind a year ago. I think there have been some very impressive efforts in government to raise our preparedness. But well, as I say, I think we got a bit behind in those preparations, but I think things have been turned around since then, and we are in much better shape in terms of government preparedness. But as Brexit Secretary Steve Barclay said, there is still a lot of extra work that's needed to be done by businesses. But in the end, this will be a shock. If you're a sheep farmer, the sudden imposition of 40% tariffs on lamb, if you export 95% of your produce to the EU, is a big shock. And that's why this week I announced a £6 billion package for the farming and fishing communities and for small businesses to try and help them adjust if we get through that. That would be part of my no-deal preparations. And I want to reassure people who've set up businesses like me that we will make a success of Brexit. We can make a success of no deal. But if there is dislocation, if there is disruption, the British government will be there for you to help you adjust in those challenging circumstances.
You've written in the Sun newspaper, I believe it is today, about your programme for housing, your plans for housing. There's an editorial in the Sun as well which says that you deserve a place in the cabinet even if not in number 10. Would you accept a place in Boris Johnson's cabinet?
After this leadership debate, we have to come together as a party. If we don't come together, then we will never get the Brexit deal through Parliament. We will never win a general election. And that is why I've always said that there will be a very senior place in my cabinet for Boris Johnson.
If you were to be in his cabinet, would you wish to stay on as Foreign Secretary and perhaps continue with Brexit negotiations?
Well, you're talking about hypothetical situations, Hannah, and we politicians never comment on hypotheticals, but I have answered that question, and of course I would be honoured to serve in a Boris Johnson cabinet.
Okay. As far as leadership and character are concerned, when was the last time you let someone down?
Well, I feel I'm letting down Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe for every single day that she remains in jail while I'm Foreign Secretary. And I have tried very hard to get her out. And I met her brave husband, Richard, on many occasions. And she has a daughter the same age as my daughter. And that is something that, is a very big deal.
How does it make you feel, and what will you do about it?
Well, I'm trying to do everything I can. But the tragic thing about that situation is that there are others in prison, other British citizens in prison in Iran, exactly the same situation as Nazanin. Now, we respect their families' wishes not to go public with those cases. That's a very personal choice. But if it wasn't for the bravery of Richard Ratcliffe, the world wouldn't know the tactics Iran uses. And it's not just Brits, by the way. There are other countries' nationals that are held hostage in jails in Iran as tools of diplomatic leverage. And this is something that we think about every day. Every foreign secretary does as well. I'm sure I'm not alone in this respect. But I think remembering the individuals suffering in these situations is something that's important to do.
And the floor is open to you all now as well. The first question is going to come, I hope, from Sean Williamson, if Sean is here. If you just raise your hand if Sean is here. Yes.
Hello, Mr. Hunt. My name's Sean Williamson. I'm 18 and I'm a Deputy Chairman of North Durham Conservative Association. Question I would like to ask you is, what is your view on political impartiality within the education system, and what must be done in order to ensure that there is political impartiality in schools and universities, as it is an issue that I've experienced myself?
Sean, well, first of all, thank you for flying the Conservative flag, because I think when I was at university, like you, we were in a tiny, tiny minority. I remember standing up for the poll tax in a debate, almost as difficult as being health secretary for 6 years. It isn't easy. Thank you also for helping to bring down the average age of our party somewhat, although very young audience we've got here in Darlington, of course. This is very important because this isn't just about being unfair to one political party or another political party. The whole foundation of our prosperity from the period of the Enlightenment onwards has been to move away from a society where if you criticize the Catholic Church, you face the Spanish Inquisition, to somewhere where you have the free flow of ideas. And that has actually been the heart of our country's imprint on the whole world when you look at people like Newton and Darwin and Adam Smith, the great, great thinkers that this country has nurtured. And so if our universities become territories where you can't argue the Conservative case because you'll get bullied or harassed, that is totally and utterly unacceptable. And I believe, of course, we talk about this as Conservative politicians, but the people who need to do much, much more about this are the Vice-Chancellors of our universities. I think there's only one Vice-Chancellor in the whole of Britain who openly says that he supports the Conservatives. And I worry that we are having a chilling effect in our institutions, and I think it's time the leaders of those institutions who say they support free speech showed an example by making sure it happens in their own campuses.
Nicola Hunter. Is Nicola here? Nicola Hunter? Not sure. No, I'm going to read the... Well, actually, I'll move on and then come back to Nicola's question. James Kell. Is James here? Just at the front, or near the front.
Where's James?
Just
yes.
3 rows back.
Good morning. How will you ensure that a post-Brexit immigration system works in the best interests of our country?
Very important question, James. And of course, one of the big benefits of Brexit is going to be able to control our borders and reassure voters up and down the country who have worried about immigration levels that this is something that they can have a say on through their vote in the general election. So that is why we must absolutely make sure that we get back control of our borders through the Brexit deal that we negotiate, or if necessary without a deal, if that's the only way that we can do it. We need an immigration system that addresses people's concerns about migration levels, but also understands the needs of businesses and organisations like the NHS that depend on 20,000 EU nurses, 10,000 EU doctors. So how do you square the circle between those two different approaches? Well, the answer is through our education system. And when I was in the NHS, I increased the number of doctors we train by 25%, the number of nurses we train by 25%, one of the biggest ever increases in doctor and nurse training, because I thought it was absolutely ridiculous that we fail to train enough people at home and then end up having to import them from overseas. So the long-term way that you reduce the need for people to come from overseas is by training up our own people to do the best jobs, the highest paid jobs, the most qualified jobs, and that's what I do.
Currently, the system, I believe, for Tier 2 workers, skilled workers within the country is very, very expensive for small, medium-sized businesses. How would you change that, given the fact that they are crucial, vital to these businesses and their function?
Well, I am a bit worried about the proposals around the £30,000 salary limit, because I think that is too high for the needs of many businesses. And I want to look at whether that is the appropriate level. I think the way we should do this in a post-Brexit context is to get an independent commission to look at what the needs of business actually are and give advice about how we set those levels in a way that works for business. But the long-term solution is to transform our education system so that our people in this country are getting the qualifications they need. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we have a very good education system for the half of school leavers who go to university. 1 or 2 university degrees I would question, but on the whole, if you go to a good or outstanding Ofsted and a good university, you'll get an education as good as anywhere in the world. I think we have a national blind spot around the consistency of the education we give for the half of school leavers who don't go to university. And if they had rigorous qualifications in the way they would in Switzerland or Germany, that meant that they could get some of those decently paid jobs, then that would allow you to bring migration levels down.
William Oxley. If you could raise your hand. Oh, at the back there.
Yeah, William Oxley from Yorkshire's food capital, Malton, or somewhere in Yorkshire. Do you really have plans for the North, or is it just going to be more warm words and platitudes?
Well, very important question, William. Yes, I do. And that is why, and I appreciate that this is not always popular with Conservative Party members, but that is why I think we have to back HS2, because we have been talking about the North-South divide for a very long time. Now we have the opportunity to bridge it. But we also need to have Northern Powerhouse Rail. And I talked about becoming the world's next Silicon Valley. And in my plans, I've said that we need to have 2 tech triangles in our country, London, Oxford, Cambridge, and a northern tech triangle to make sure that that tech revolution happens throughout our country. And, as a Conservative Party, if we remain the party of our southeastern heartlands, we will never win the marginal seats like Stockton South that we need to get back, like Middlesbrough South and Cleveland East, which we need to hold. That is why we have to be the party of the whole country. So that is why my commitment to those transport projects is unequivocal.
And staying with the theme, Jacob Young has a question at the front, on the front row here.
Cheers. Jacob Young, I work in the chemical industry in Redcar. Here in Teesside, Teesport is one of the largest ports in the UK. As Prime Minister in a post-Brexit Britain, will you support Teesside manufacturing and commit to making our port the first UK free port?
I think the free ports idea is an interesting one. I have done work in the past at the Port of Bristol, and I've had discussions about how the free port concept can work. And I think it's got potential. So I would be happy to look at doing that and see if there's some potential for Teesside.
Would you support a UK-wide policy for free ports?
I think it would be difficult to do it as a UK-wide policy. I'm not sure I know of any large country in the world that has done that for all their ports. But as a way of attracting investment into areas that need extra investment, I think it has potential.
So you're not committing to it, but you would look into it?
Yes.
Okay. Georgia Ray. Just down to the right.
Hi, Georgie Ray from Northumberland. I'm not quite sure if this question is as germane to you as it might have been to Boris, so forgive me. The Good Friday Agreement simply does not allow a hard border in Ireland, and the technology does not yet exist for a soft border. So given this fact, it seems that Britain just cannot leave the EU in the near future. It seems to be an impossibility. And I wonder why this fact was never broached during the course of the referendum. I can't ever recall this being mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. I think that we have not had a good debate on the Northern Irish border, but I am actually as cross with the EU for the way that they have handled that issue as any discussions that were had in the referendum campaign, where frankly there were exaggerated claims made on both sides, and that's what the British people are very good at doing. They're cutting through the fog of claims that politicians make and coming to their own judgment, as they did in that referendum campaign. I believe there is a technology solution. I don't believe it's new technology. I think it will take some time to put it into practice, so it's not something that you could have ready in a matter of weeks. And we've had an excellent Alternative Arrangements Commission led by two MPs, Nicky Morgan and Greg Hands, and I think their work is good. The EU haven't wanted to talk about this because, of course, they would prefer us to stay in the customs union where we have to follow EU tariffs. And that was really why they so strongly supported the backstop. I think they must know now that the backstop will never get through the UK Parliament, and that's why it's time to engage properly on technology solutions. And I think that if you think about how technology is transforming every other aspect of our lives, in 10 years' time, when it comes to the transit of goods, most countries will have what the Germans call invisible borders, where things are done through registering advance on the internet. Checks are done at the factories at either end, and you don't need to have those checks on the border. And the way we're going to solve this is through an absolute commitment to no return to a hard border on the island of Ireland, imagination about what technology is capable of doing, and also honesty with the EU, because they too don't want to leave without a deal. So embracing the possibility of technology is the way to get a win-win for both them and us.
Tom Watson. Not that one.
Yeah, Tom Watson from Scotch Corner. What specific policy would you introduce, if elected, to aid the environment?
Thank you, Tom. Hearing your name reminds me of a Conservative councillor I met in Sussex in the middle of the junior doctors' strike, whose name was Jeremy Hunt. And I remember expressing some sympathy for him. Two brief comments on that. First of all, getting the environment right is a litmus test for young people as to whether Conservatives will be conservers, stewards of the planet. And they, if we're going to get their support on board, this is an absolute test of values for them. And we have to show them that we are true Conservatives and we will leave the planet in the same or a better state than it is today. But you said specific policies. So I want to give you one, and this may lose me a few votes, but I'm going to say it anyway. We are unfortunately going to have to dig up our roads again in order to have 1 gigabite ultra-fast broadband connections to all our homes over the next few years. This is the way technology is going, and we absolutely have to do this if we want to be at the forefront of the changes in technology. So my proposal is, at the same time as we do that, in our cities and in our towns where we have residents parking, why don't we put in electric car charging points at the same time so that we can move to electric car only towns and cities? And this would dramatically improve the pollution levels in our towns and cities, which is very important to young mums and dads when they're taking their kids for the school pickup. It would reduce emissions, and it would mean we could promise that within a decade we have pollution-free cities in our country. So that's my specific proposal.
The sale of electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles has dropped significantly from this month in comparison to this time last year. Is that the government's fault, infrastructure fault?
Well, I think we need to do more to incentivise the sale of electric cars. I think it's a big opportunity for this country, and I don't know the reasons why there's been that specific drop in the last month, but you know, we should be in favour of them.
And do you support Theresa May's current plan to be carbon neutral by 2050?
Yes.
You do, yeah. Trevor Brooks, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hunt. My question relates around WASPy women, and it's what are your plans to address the injustice of the 1950s women's state pension scandal?
Well, I understand the injustice. I've had constituents who've come to me and are understandably very angry. So I think the equalisation of the pension age was the right thing to do. We are a society where we must treat men and women absolutely equally. And again, I appreciate this isn't popular with everyone, but I think we are going to have to gradually raise the age at which people draw their pension, because we are all living so much longer, because we had an absolutely outstanding health secretary for 6 years who put years and years onto people's life expectancy, whoever he may be. And so those are difficult choices, but nonetheless they are the reality. Now, when you decide you're going to make those changes because they're the right thing to do, you then put in place support for the women who are affected by the rising of the pension age so that it is the same as for men. And that support invariably has a cut-off point, and the people the wrong side of that cut-off point are directly affected. So what I've committed to do is to re-look at that issue. I'm not going to go further than that, but I do make that commitment because I've had too many constituents who've come to me and explained to me how very unfair the current situation is.
Jane Branch, sort of just off the centre there.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Jane Branch. I work for a charity delivering homeless prevention services in North Yorkshire.
Dementia, is that?
Homelessness prevention.
Homelessness prevention, right.
Yeah. The austerity cuts to local government spending has hit local communities very hard. Brexit seems to have overtaken everything. This needs to be put right. Will this be a priority for you?
Thank you, Jane. And let me say something very specific about homelessness prevention, as that's your field. The biggest single thing we can do, we've got some very good initiatives on rough sleeping, which are starting to bear fruit, although we have seen the numbers rising, but they've just started to fall a little bit. But the biggest single thing I think we can do is to improve mental health provision. And that is something that I was very closely involved with when I was Health Secretary. We've got to train up about 19,000 more mental health professionals over the next few years before we can fully ramp up mental health provision. But that's the specific thing on homelessness. The broader question on austerity. I was part of the cabinet that arrived in 2010, faced with the biggest financial crisis since the Second World War. And I think that David Cameron and George Osborne did a superb job, some very, very tough decisions, cuts in public spending. But the result of those tough decisions, we put the economy back on its feet. And I was able to secure a big extra funding settlement for the NHS as Health Secretary. And I defend what happened then, but with the benefit of hindsight, and it is only with the benefit of hindsight, I think there were a couple of areas where austerity did go too far. And one of them was on police numbers, where there was a delayed effect. Crime carried on falling for a while, but now I think we've seen a rise in knife crime, and we need to do something about that. And the other is the social care system, where I think we have too many older people trapped in hospital beds because they can't get a package of support in the community. And as a Conservative, I want us to be a country where every single older person is treated with dignity and respect. So those would be the two things I want to look at most closely.
Thank you, Jane. Adam Wildsmith. Looking around, just at the second row here.
Thank you. Do you think no deal would put at risk the reputation of the Tories as the party of business?
Well, I feel this issue very acutely as someone who's run their own business and someone who has had to lay people off in my business, good people who've worked hard, who've given me their loyalty and support over many years, because of a sudden change in market conditions that means that I can't afford to employ them anymore. And that is one of the most heartbreaking conversations that you ever have to have if you've run a business. So I would never make light of the challenges of a no-deal Brexit. And I am passionate for us to be the party of business. But we're also the party of democratic values. And the country voted to leave the European Union. And one of the things that we are respected for all around the world is the fact that we are one of the oldest and most robust democracies in the world. And people know that the political establishment in this country didn't want to leave the European Union. People like me campaigned to remain. And they're looking at us and they're saying, are you really that brilliant democracy you've been telling us you are? Because we're just going to give you this little test. We're going to ask you to do something the political establishment didn't want to do. And we've got to look them in the eye and say, yes, we are that democracy, because this is a country where politicians do what the people tell them. So for businesses, I say to them, I'm going to put in place a huge package of support, including cutting corporation tax to one of the lowest levels in the world, 12.5%, the levels they had in Ireland, big support for farmers, fishing communities. And we're going to leave the European Union. And we're going to make it a tremendous success. And who the biggest winners will be when we get to the other side, it's the businesses up and down this country. That's what I'm going to do.
Samantha Liddle. Is Samantha here? Samantha Liddle? No? No, I don't think I can see a raised hand. Okay, this is again on no deal. Anthony Bentley. Is Anthony here? Just at the front.
Good afternoon. Tony Bentley from Seaham in County Durham. On no deal, we would be reliant on the new trade partners, and each of those would be looking to maximise their own advantage, either politically, for example, China, South America, or economically, our friends in the EU or USA. How would you balance these conflicting interests?
Well, one of the biggest jobs that we are going to have to do post-Brexit is to secure trade deals all over the world. And people always look for advantage in a trade deal. But the biggest advantage to both sides in a trade deal is to remove barriers to trade. And that's what trade deals are all about. When I went to Edinburgh 3 weeks ago, I stood, or maybe it was, time is flying at the moment, it may have been a little bit further than that. I remember standing under the statue of Adam Smith, who was the person who understood how powerful trade can be. And this is the country that understands more than any in the world the benefits of free trade. And so I am absolutely confident that we will be able to argue the case for free trade deals, particularly because I have people like Liam Fox supporting me in this campaign, who has been an outstanding trade secretary and a brilliant advocate for free trade. So we have the Americans, who are very, very keen to bring down tariffs and quotas and restrictions on trade between ourselves and the United States. The trade deal with China would be an excellent one to have. We don't have one at the moment. The EU doesn't have one with China, and there are some more complex issues to do with that. When it comes to the EU, they have a trade surplus in products with us. So there's clear economic advantage to them to doing it. So I am confident we will get brilliant trade deals. It'll take us a few years to do so, but we'll set ourselves up for the future.
Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And thank you as well. As I said, we know that ballots have already gone out, ballot papers have already been sent out. It is down to you as the Tory party membership to decide the next Prime Minister of this country. The hustings continue. As I said, we're about halfway through at the moment. So I believe the candidates are heading north of the border to Scotland next. So perhaps you can follow them there. Thank you for your contribution this morning.